G'day, how you going? I'm Steve Schiller, and I just want to share with you about the impact of Jesus Christ and what he's done in my life. I grew up in the Adelaide Hills without a whole lot of knowledge of the gospel, but I had enough to plant a seed, I guess. I grew up in a Lutheran environment, so the whole concept of what I took in was probably filtered by my surroundings. And the Trinity that I believed in was Easter Bunny, Santa Claus and God. So that's not what I was taught, but it's what came to me as a young kid. And so all these things seem to be out there, a little bit mysterious and not exactly very engaging. So I went through life with, as a kid, just trying to navigate all this stuff, and soon discovered that Santa Claus was not quite what I'd been told it was, and same with Easter Bunny. And the entire thing of God was very much under suspicion. So the attractiveness of evolution, there is no God, the whole thing was very attractive to me. Now, the big reason for that, I guess, was good people go to heaven, bad people go to hell. So that sort of an idea comes in through the thing of Santa, or good kids get presents, bad kids not getting presents. Now, my parents always gave me presents, but I always felt like I was the kid that wasn't able to be the right person that I should have been. Always in trouble at primary school. I had dyslexia, so in those days they don't really diagnose it, so I was just labelled the naughty kid. So I had this thing on me of the naughty kid, the naughty person. I was in a small country primary school. When I got into the high school, there was a lot more people there, and when you're in a small school, being the naughty kid was not such a big factor. When you're in a big school, being the naughty kid, it sort of grows, So then it grew into different things with friends and whatever, and I had a big age gap between myself and my dad, so that played into me not really getting along with him like I should have. I don't know the dynamics of it really. Dad was a foster child, so I probably took on a lot of his baggage. And so I was screaming for attention all the time, and I couldn't get positive attention, so negative attention was the one I went for. If my mates did something wrong, I'd have to reinvent it to a bigger level. So I took everything that was thrown at me, just trying to gain attention, trying to push it further, push the boundaries further. Now, my mum was awesome. She was a woman that I believe had a genuine faith, and she always said to me, "Steve, it's not you, it's the company you keep that is the problem." Now, every mother says stuff like that, whether they're right or wrong, they're going to say it. And so I guess it kept on coming back to me as the trouble increased around my life, that I've got to hang around with better people. So I decided to go along to the youth group that they had at the church. Even though I really didn't believe in God, I thought if I hang around with better people, things will change. So it didn't take long until the youth group's trying to get rid of me. They didn't want me there. They had a camp on, so I went to the camp. I turned up with a bootload of beer. They were trying to get me off the property and out of the place, and I stood my ground, and I just, it was just rebellion, defiant, absolutely no respect for leaders or leadership or authority, and I just ploughed my way through it. And then they brought in a speaker into this camp. Now, I just want to mention the idea that is prevalent in some churches, and that is when you're sprinkled with water as a baby, you're then on the way to heaven. Now, this idea is not the way the Bible teaches it, but this is the idea and the thing that was put upon Lutherans. I believe it's put upon Catholics. It's put upon many different people. And so if that's all there is to Christianity, I couldn't see the point. It just seemed to be so disassociated from everything. So they had a speaker come to the camp, and he shared his testimony. I'd never ever heard a testimony. I didn't know what it was. And this guy, his name was Barry Good, and he'd come to know Jesus in Yatala Prison in South Australia after doing a couple of armed robberies and doing substantial time in jail. And he started to talk about God like God was real, not just that he existed, but that he was real. And he talked about how God had come into his life and how it transformed him, and the different things that had happened. And it just sounded so crazy to me. In fact, I thought he was a Fruit Loop. I thought he was nuts. I'm sitting at the back of this room, freaking out, hating the guy, absolutely hating him, really uncomfortable, really could not get a handle on it. Like if something goes wrong with your mind and you become convinced of something like that, there's got to be a mental problem, you know. And so I was really, really uncomfortable around him. And he didn't make an appeal for salvation as a lot of people would know it to be, you know, like pray this prayer or open your heart to Jesus. There was none of that done, I guess because he understood his audience. And so he just sowed a seed. He said, if you find Jesus Christ, you'll know God. And anyhow, it just brushed off of me in anger and I just despised him. And when he left the camp, I just went back to all my nonsense, and dragging people down that I could, and creating havoc through the place. And well, after that was over, life spiraled down like you wouldn't believe. I was living in a car. I was couch surfing. I was hanging out with people that was getting way out of control. And I ended up having 2 suicide attempts in 1 week. And by the end of that particular week, I was somewhere between Strathalbyn and Victor Harbor in South Australia with 3 other young people. We was in my car. I'd smashed the car up the night before and spent an entire night with no sleep putting it back together with parts from another car. And we're on the side of this road, and they're just wanting to get wildly out of control on substance. And we were young, we were crazy, we were stupid. I couldn't understand where we were heading, but I always just pushed the boundaries further than anyone else. So whatever they did, I had to reinvent worse. But this time, something inside of me was so empty that it couldn't be filled by trying to fill a void that way. It was just so wrecked inside of me. And something in me was so aware that everything about my life was completely wrong. Whereas before, the wrong felt right. I loved sin. I was a good sinner. I absolutely thrived on it. But this was sort of like a tipping point, and I didn't understand what the tipping point meant. So we're in the car. The music is so loud. We're on a dirt road, miles away from houses, miles away from people. And on the edge of the road, I got the sound system cranked until the speakers are nearly bouncing into the back window. We're listening to AC/DC, and people are just losing it. We were caught up in some sort of I guess really it's some sort of worship. We didn't know what it was. We would just gravitate to it. We would go out of control. But inside of me is this scream of empty, this scream of nothing is going to work. And I pulled the tape out of the tape player. Now I'm showing my age, aren't I? The old tape player. I pulled it out and I threw it into the middle of the paddock, and it was absolute silence until the deafening screams of my peers just went mad. These guys just completely went psycho. And I grabbed another tape and I pushed it into the tape player, and it was Dire Straits. It started playing Money for Nothing. It sort of builds up into a guitar riff, and it just takes off into something. And as I did, I just walked away from the car, maybe a couple hundred meters up the dirt road. I didn't know why. I just had to be away from everything. And as I'm standing there, something happened which I didn't expect. Now, I don't know how this happens, but I prayed. I didn't believe in God, but I prayed. My head did not pray. My mind wasn't thinking of it. Emotionally, I wasn't there. I didn't have any thoughts of God. It was just like there is a part of us that the Bible calls deep, and the Word of God says the deep calls out to deep. and it come pouring out of me from somewhere I didn't even know existed, a place that was so deep, and I don't even know what I prayed. It was kind of like it was just an emotion of, well, I've had a gutful. If you're real, I got to come to you. I don't know. There was no words in it. It just came. And as it happened, there was another guy from the car that had followed me up the road towards where I was, and he stood next to me. And this guy, his name was Gordon. We used to call him Buddha because he was fat and whatever, like I am today. But he stood next to me. And this guy prayed as well, and I could hear him audibly praying, as if it was just one prayer from two people. I didn't know what was happening, and but I felt this power. I felt this flood of love. I'd never felt anything like it. And physically, the night was it was moonlit, but it was clouded in. It was darkened. It was just dark as. And the clouds moved in such a way that it just opened between us and the moon. And I'd never felt such a brightness of light, even from the sun. Physically, you couldn't see it with your eyes, but you could feel it. It was like it was pouring into us. And the two of us were changed. We didn't know what had hit us. I'd never felt any. I felt like eternity had vanished and life had just rebooted. And the old life was no longer even available. It was like something had separated one world from another. I'd never felt such a flood of love. And the two of us, we might have stood there for 5 minutes. It felt like eternity. We walked back to the car. We had these two girls in the car that we were mistreating. We were doing all the wrong things with. We were just wild young teenagers, out of control, living for lust and living for filth and living for whatever we could engage. And we got back into the car and we're trying to tell these two girls about God. Like suddenly we are God people wanting to talk about God, and they hated us. They just freaked out. They were screaming, they were yelling at us. The girlfriend I had at the time, which was one of them, she was involved in witchcraft and the occult. So you can imagine this clash of two kingdoms. So where I hated Barry Good for the way that he spoke at that camp, suddenly I'm standing in his shoes with someone hating me. I didn't even know what had happened. I didn't know what I was introduced to. I didn't know there was two kingdoms. I had no idea of these things. I loaded everyone into the car and I drove them back into the town of Strathallan, and I just dumped them off and I hoiked out of there. And as I did, I'm driving up the road. I'm throwing alcohol out the car. I'm throwing drugs out the car. I'm throwing pornography out the car. I didn't know what the word repent was, but it exploded inside of me that there was the power to change, and it was I had the choice, and something was happening. It was almost like it wasn't me doing it, but it was God had invaded me and started to do it inside of me. I was so scared that Gordon would tell me that this never happened. I thought that, because I thought that Barry Good, I thought he had a nutcase thing going on in his head, and I thought if that's what Gordon thinks has happened to me, I wouldn't be able to handle it. I need God. I'd found him and I need him. I didn't even know. I didn't know the parable of the pearl of great price, where the guy buried it. He sold everything to buy it, or the treasure found in the paddock where he buried it, and sold everything and bought the paddock and dug it up. But I valued what I'd grabbed, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it. Even the guy that stood next to me when it all happened, I needed God. I knew it. And I thought, if I'm out of my mind, I'm happy now. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but I'm happy now. I remember different people as time went on. I didn't see Gordon again for 18 months. I found him doing a Life in the Spirit course in a Uniting Church. We both found one another there following Jesus. I tried to tell people what had happened to me. And people just freaked out. They didn't like the whole idea of it. One guy walked up to me 2 weeks after I'd had this roadside encounter in the workplace. He said, "What's happened to you? You're so different." I said, "What's different?" He said, "You're nice to people now. You were never nice to anyone before." And I said, "Well, I met God." He just laughed at me and he wandered off. He didn't know where to go with that. I didn't know how to evangelize. I didn't know I didn't know what was going on. All I knew was God was real. And as I began to, I just become a praying man. I was talking to him all the time. And a song would come on the radio and the lyrics would be bang on the stuff that I've been talking to him about. It was like he turned up everywhere talking back to me. All of a sudden, it was relationship. It was real. It was not hidden anywhere. And I didn't know how to tell people about what was going on. I tried to tell people within, different people I thought I could try within the Lutheran Church, and basically the answer I had was, we liked you more when you was on substance. You've really lost it now. You've really gone over the bend. And it was another 4 months until one night around a bonfire, I'm talking with this girl, and I had a complete breakdown. Not a complete breakdown, but I just got flooded with the truth of God, and I broke. Okay, so it was a interesting thing. I sat with this girl. She said, "Are you all right?" I said, "I just can't hold this in anymore. I've got to talk to people. And as I began to tell her about it, she said, "I've got a friend who said something similar happened to him, and he said he's been born again." And when I heard those words, born again, that was the only title that could possibly describe this encounter. It was like one life had gone and the new had come. Now, I want to tell you, life did not become trouble-free. Life was full of trouble, but I had someone to walk me with it. And the journey ahead, the road ahead, full of potholes, but I had someone holding my hand, and his name is the Lord Jesus Christ. And he got me up over every pothole, and I didn't fall into them, and I'm still here today. Thank you for listening.